Hello everyone and welcome back to Football Forecast, and in today's video we'll be reviewing every Premier League team's season so far. And if you enjoy this video, go subscribe to the YouTube channel as well as liking the video. For certain teams and when I think it matters, I'll be taking European competition into account as well as domestic competition. So starting off with Arsenal, and I'm not even going to bother to sort of talk about this too much. Arsenal are obviously an A, they're top of the Premier League, they're absolutely flying. As of recording, they're 5 points clear of Manchester City, but they have a game in hand against Liverpool, which you'd expect them to win, so they're most likely go 8 points clear. They're also top of the Champions League phase, and they are through to the League Cup semi-finals. There's no real argument for them not to be an A. So then we're on to Aston Villa, and Aston Villa have been good so far this season. They are currently third place in the Premier League. In fact, they've been absolutely outstanding, not just good. And they struggled at the side, but as we always see from Unai Emery, he managed to turn that Villa side around. He is a quality manager and he definitely deserves to be one of the managers of the season so far. And I am definitely going to put Aston Villa in A. And they've also been outstanding in the Europa League. So then we're on to Bournemouth, and I'm going to put Bournemouth straight away in C, and I'll explain why. Bournemouth have been alright so far this season, because at the start they were brilliant, and they would have gone in A if they continue like that. But lately, Bournemouth have been poor. They did just win against Spurs, though. But apart from that, recently, they've been absolutely terrible. And they're defensively really struggling. The reason why I haven't put anything above a C is because I think with Bournemouth, as long as they stay up, they're doing a decent job. And they're nowhere near relegation zone. So I think a C is a fair ranking. So then we are on to Brentford, and I'm going to put Brentford in A. I've been so impressed with Brentford so far this season. Most people either have Brentford going down or somewhere near the relegation zone, and they are currently in 5th place. I can't quite believe I am saying this. They've been absolutely outstanding, and Keith Andrews has made that side a very difficult side to beat. And we never feel comfortable about playing them. It always goes, oh, here's a tough game, especially when you're playing them at Brentford. And they're really effective at what they do. And they score lots of goals, and at points they can actually be a real good defensive side when they need to be. And you've got to give hats off to the recruitment team for bringing in the right players to replace your Norgards, your Wissers and your Mbeumus that they all lost in the summer. So then we're on to one of the most inconsistent sides in the Premier League. That is Brighton. 1 week Brighton look great, and you would say they are an A. For example, Chelsea and in the Manchester City home game at the start of the season, they look great. And then other games, they perform at a really low level. And for that reason, I think they're just the most obvious C on the list. Because that's what they are. They're an A in one game and an E in another game. So then we're on to Burnley. And I feel a bit bad for Burnley because their expectations at the start of the season is obviously to stay up. But no one actually expects Burnley to stay up. Their squad's not good enough. Scott Parker's probably not good enough as a manager as well. But what is he actually supposed to do? He's just a bit hamstrung with the quality of the side that he has. And part of me goes, you know what, being a 19th, that's probably about expectations, but I have decided to put them in D. I feel like if they were an 18th and actually fighting a bit and maybe had a chance of surviving, I'd probably put them in C. But right now, I just can't see a world where Burnley stay up, so they can be no higher than D. So then we're on to Chelsea. I've been disappointed with Chelsea so far this season. My expectations for Chelsea were to at least put some sort of title push together and at least get Champions League football at an absolute minimum. And right now they're in 8th place and they're out of both of those. As well as a side like Brentford is above Chelsea, which is absolutely tragic for Chelsea. They've managed to get to the League Cup semi-finals and they've been alright in the Champions League, inconsistent, winning against Barcelona but then losing against Atalanta the next week, and that sort of sums up Chelsea so far this season. I think I'm going to put them in D because I've been overall disappointed with them. So then we're on to Crystal Palace, and I just think Crystal Palace are just a classic C. They've just been alright so far this season. I think people had too high expectations for Crystal Palace. I looked at the side and said, look, European football is going to be a real problem for them because of the lack of depth, and that's what it's proven to be. And especially in the Europa Conference League, where you've generally got to travel a lot more than in the other European competitions, because you end up playing teams in the middle of nowhere in Europe, which is often really far away and hard to get to. If they didn't have Europa Conference League, I think my expectation for Palace would be higher. They haven't won a single match, the match after they played the Europa Conference League game, so that's clearly been a massive problem for them. And I think 13th place is about where Crystal Palace should be finishing by the end of the season. And they've been alright in the Europa Conference League. I think they'll be a bit disappointed they didn't get in the top 8, which just means extra fixtures for them. And if they sort out some depth in January, then I do actually think Palace can finish higher than this. So then we've got Everton. Everton think currently 12th place in the Premier League. And I think they're a side where you'd say they have pretty big expectations for the season, where they've brought in the likes of Dewsbury Hall and Njai. They definitely shouldn't be in a relegation battle this year, which in fairness to them, they are not. But because the table is so congested, I think I can let them off for the fact that they're only in 12th place. I'm going to give Everton a C. So then we're on to Fulham. Fulham are currently in ninth place in the Premier League, in the top half, which I don't think a lot of people expected from them so far. It is so congested around the middle though. So for me, when you're around this sort of place right now, it doesn't really matter around the placing. They started the season quite poor, did Fulham, but recently they've been a lot better. I think for Fulham, they're just sort of a classic C. So then we've got Leeds United. In the last 7 games, they've completely changed my opinion on the Leeds side. If you asked me this 4 or 5 weeks ago, I'm saying Leeds are either a D or an E. And all of a sudden, I think I'm saying Leeds are a B. I've been so impressed with Leeds United in the last month. And you've got to give massive credit to Farke for this. He has completely changed that side. So then we're on to Liverpool. And Liverpool have had a terrible season so far. There's no real other way to sugarcoat it. They've been terrible. And I think it's a question of are Liverpool in D or E? And I think there are arguments for both. In the Champions League, Liverpool have been pretty mixed, pretty much like their Premier League campaign. They lost to PSV 4-1, but then won against Real Madrid 1-0. And as a Liverpool fan, it is difficult to put us where we should be, because really we should 100% be in the title race, considering how much money we spent and our expectations from last season. We are, though, still in 4th place, which may just allow me to put us in D. But if we were in a couple of places down, I think we're 100% in E. And it's very tight between these two rankings. Let me know what you would put for this. I'm confused on where I stand on this. So then we're on to Manchester City. They are currently 5 points behind Arsenal as of recording. Could be 8 if Arsenal win their game in hand. And I think this is sort of around where I expected City to be, sort of 8 points behind Arsenal or whoever are leading the Premier League, because I didn't feel like they had the capabilities to go on and win it at the start of the season, as well as they're in the League Cup semi-final and they're doing well in the Champions League. I think I'm going to put Manchester City in C. I think this is about where I expected them to be. If they were closer to Arsenal, I could probably put them in B, but I think the gap right now is too big. So then we're on to Manchester United. Manchester United are currently in 7th place, and they have sacked Amrin as manager, but this is because of off-the-pitch issues and not sort of performance on the pitch in terms of their results they were getting. This is obviously because he called out the owners in public, so I don't think that really matters about in terms of ranking their season. And so far, they've had a bit of an alright season. It's not been absolutely awful, but it's not been really good. And their problem, I think, is against the weaker sides where they dominate the ball. And I think that's the main thing Manchester United did change with a new manager, which I'm not sure if is going to quite happen because I don't think they're set up as a club to do this. But they really need to be better when United have more than 50% possession of the ball. And if they do this, they can maybe move up to a B or an A. But for now, I'm going to put them in as a C of their season so far. So then we're on to Newcastle United. In the last couple of weeks, they have been good, and they are currently in 6th place in the Premier League. This is probably about where most people expected Newcastle to be, as well as they are in the League Cup semi-final and have done well in the Champions League so far. So overall, I think they've done pretty well this season. I think if we would do this a couple of weeks ago, we'd probably be saying Newcastle's probably a D, but I think they've done enough now to go into C. So then we're on to Nottingham Forest, and Nottingham Forest are currently just above the relegation zone, and I think they're lucky to be this safe in the Premier League right now. They're pretty lucky to be this far clear of the relegation zone. It's mainly due to the fact West Ham is so crap, and it's pretty hard to be much worse than them. In the Europa League, they've been alright, and I think that probably saves them from being in E. And for that reason, I think I'm going to put Forest in D. Very close, though, to E. They've also made some poor decisions throughout the season. For example, sacking Nuno and then appointing Ange, and then going back to Sean Dyche, sort of completely changing the styles. I think the appointment of Dyche, though, has probably put them into D. If they decide to stay with Ange for much longer, I think we'd probably be looking at Forest and E. So then we are on to Sunderland, and this is one of the easiest A of the rankings, and this is because no one expected Sunderland to have this good of a season. They are flying in the Premier League right now. They are currently 10th place, and they're not that far off European football. If they were to do this, that would be incredible. They've brought in some great players like Granit Xhaka, and they've completely overperformed. I had them going down at the start of the season. I've regretted that hugely after watching them, and it's just great to see them so high in the league. So then we are on to Spurs, and this is a real interesting debate, and it's between D and E. Spurs are absolutely shocking to watch. They are one of the worst sides to watch, and I don't think it's right to go, oh, Spurs were in 17th last year. That means that they're having an alright season because they're now just performing at the same level. Because that season had a lot more context to it in terms of targets, in terms of targeting that Europa League. They're just terrible under Frank. They're one of the worst sides I have watched in the Premier League this season, and I am actually going to put Spurs in E because the quality of the squad they have should be finishing much higher. Look, there are a couple of players in that team that are crap, but overall the squad's a lot better than what it's showing. and sack Thomas Frank now. He's nowhere near good enough. So then we're on to West Ham, and this is one of the easiest E. They are going down. It is that simple. I'm almost certain West Ham are getting relegated. They're nowhere near good enough, and they're actually just a bit of an embarrassment at this point. They've got the worst stadium in the league. They've got one of the worst sides, and they're just a bit of a depressing football club right now. I don't think it matters who the manager is. The squad is simply not good enough to stay in the Premier League, and I don't think any West Ham fan will argue with me with putting West Ham in E. Then on to Wolves, and Wolves are actually started to play some decent football recently. They've actually been showing a bit of fight recently, but there's no doubt about it. Wolves are 100% in E. They're almost certain to go down, and they're nowhere near good enough. And considering this was an established Premier League club, the owners have absolutely destroyed that club. It's that simple by continuously selling the best player every year. And that's what happens eventually. Eventually it does catch up with you, especially when Wolves' recruitment isn't nowhere near as good as a Brentford's, a Bournemouth's, a Brighton's, who are actually set up to do that. Let me know your thoughts on this ranking, and if you enjoy this video, go subscribe to this channel as well as liking the video.